Hello, ladies. Welcome to this live. We are on part 5 of my Rebrand with Me series, where I'm bringing you in behind the scenes of my own rebrand. And we're going through the assets today that kind of polish off the brand. Sometimes I call this like the bling of your brand, the little additional details and touches that bring it to life in just even more of a cohesive way than just maybe a logo. So these can be things like patterns, different fonts and business cards or stationery, presentation templates, Instagrams, the way that you use your photography, all of that. So we'll talk about more of that in just a minute. And these are just when I do these for my clients, I'm giving them additional assets to use for their brand. And, hopefully kind of filling in the pieces, right? So if you are here, say hi. I'm just going to make sure that we're showing up in the group as well and grab the link here for those who joined or joining the event. But let me know too. I'd love to hear from you if you've been following this series, if you've enjoyed this, if this has been helpful for you as you're, exploring different branding questions in your own business. These are something that I think, like, for most of you who've been in business for a little while, these are good questions to think about, think through. And so I wanted to provide like some inspiration in my own process and kind of walk you through the things that I do for my clients. I am not seeing the live in the group. So if you can hear me, go ahead and raise your hand and say hi. Oh, there it is. And if you're watching live, say hi. If you are watching the replay, put hashtag replay. I know that some people are catching that. And then I'll tag those of you who are. So with that, we're going to dive in a little bit more. If you don't know who I am, my name is Allie, and I'm a brand and website designer. And I work with women's service providers to help create these things that work, right? That book them clients in their business, because I've seen this again and again, that a brand and a website that are done thoughtfully and intentionally get results. They get new clients. They attract a target market. They make a business revenue. They have a return on investment. So I know, I'm passionate about helping women build their businesses toward their big, scary dream. And I talk about that a lot because I have one. I have that big, scary dream in my life that my husband and I are working toward, and I know you do too. And so it's always fun to hear from those of you who are here in this group what yours is, whether that's to retire your husband, or to take your dream vacation, or to buy your dream house, or to quit your 9 to 5, all of those things. So if you're here, again, don't forget to say hi, say hashtag replay. And if you've been following along, you have heard me say that I've been in business for 7 years. The brand that I created back 7 years ago, it was back more when I was kind of serving everybody, doing everything, and didn't really have a specific target market in mind. And I kind of was trying out different types of clients to figure out what I liked. And I think that's a great way to do it, right? Like, get in there, get your feet wet, and then you can kind of hone in on your branding. So I was there, and then, over that time, lots has changed in my business. The skill set that I offer, I've gotten a lot better at what I do. The clients that I work with, the strategy that I use, all of that has kind of reshaped my offers have shifted. So it was really time for me to dig in and rebrand as well. And I'm going through my own process. So we've gone through, in the past 5 weeks or so, 6 weeks, we've gone through my brand strategy, visual inspiration. We created a mood board. And then last week I presented some logo options, which, by the way, there is 3 options that I'm asking for votes on in this group. So I pinned that post to the top. If you haven't voted, I would love to hear your input on which direction you like. Those are still like a little bit in refinement. And so I'm going to go back and maybe tweak some little things in the whatever final choice I make. And so, but I love hearing your thoughts. You guys have all had some really great things to say. And it's always interesting to hear back from people. And I always recommend you do this too when you are making branding decisions. So go ahead and do that today. So today I'm going to be doing the final touches on my brand. This morning, I actually ended up going to a local school. They're doing like an entrepreneurship course, which I think is awesome. It was a bunch of middle school students, and I got to present to them about branding. And this was so fun because it really does make you kind of dial things in when you have to present to kids about what you do, it really makes you think about like the nuts and bolts and really get clear about like keeping things simple, which I think we could all do, right? Um, and so the principal had asked me to talk about this idea of branding, and I know it can be kind of this ethereal thing. But one thing I talked to them about, and I've actually mentioned this before in some of my presentations here, is that you want to think about your business as like a car, right? So there's the engine, which is like maybe the nuts and bolts of what you do, what you offer, the thing that kind of keeps you running. There's the gas, which is like your marketing. That's the fuel that gets you out there, that gets people, you've seen by people. And then your branding is really the interior. So when you get in that car, what does that feel like? What does that look like? What is the interior finishes? Is it a leather interior, or is it kind of like a fabric? Is there a sunroof? So one of the questions I asked them is like, well, what kind of car do you want to build? Is this the luxury sports car that has like all the flashy things with like red accents and the seats that are kind of like low and leather everywhere and flashy lights on the screens and all of that? Or are you building like more of a vintage camper van that is kind of rugged and outdoorsy and gets people outside and has those elements that allow people to go camping? Or is it more like the practical SUV with, the space for the car seats and the third row, right? So there's these different styles and experiences that you're creating with your brand, and you want to think about that. Like, what kind of environment do you want to create? What kind of experience do you want to create? So all of that goes into branding. And this matters because that experience is really important for your ideal customer, right? Every little detail kind of brings that experience together. And when you get into a luxury car, like maybe it's really quiet, maybe there's a sunroof, maybe it's the steering wheel is heated. That is an amazing touch, right? Especially in the winter here in Idaho. The backup camera is like really sharp and clear. There are certain colors and leather seats, and if there was only one of those things there in place, it wouldn't have quite that, three-dimensional like experience that kind of touches all the senses, right? So this is true with brand because you don't want it to just be your logo. Like certainly a logo is an important thing, but it's not the be all end all of your brand. It is one element that you're putting together to support your message and to attract your target market. The other things can be things like, the fonts that you choose, the graphics that you use, the patterns and textures, the assets like business cards and stationery brochures, your social media templates, your photography style, what filters you use, those kinds of things. So I'm going to show you a little bit some of the things I've been working about for my brand that are all still in progress, but would love to give you just kind of a little bit of that behind the scenes glimpse. Let me know too if you are able to see that presentation, and hopefully you can actually see some of the details here. So first off, just kind of as a reminder, like here's what my mood board looks like, what I came up with for my brand. I wanted it to be like sophisticated, elegant, have like kind of a classy style, but I also want it to feel relatable and cozy and natural because that is kind of a part of me, right? That I want to share. And so when I was looking at some of these additional assets to add to my brand, I was constantly going back to this, like making sure it's in line and even using it as some inspiration. And you'll see that especially with some of my patterns. So here's like some of the ideas for my typography. There's two different directions here, and you'll see that they are relatively similar. They're not like dramatically different, and that's because I had already narrowed in on a style with my mood board that I was going through. So really, it's a lot of it is kind of in the nuance, right? So on the left, I have like a title font. I have an accent font, which is that script, and then I have a paragraph font. And choosing fonts, it's really interesting, can be just this agonizing process for people. And I know that too, because it is one of those areas in branding projects that I spend a lot of time on. Because usually there's like 5 things I'm looking for all at once in one particular font. And you're trying to find them and sorting through all of these things, and you'll get like 4 of them, but the 5th is missing. And so I keep looking. And so a lot of times this takes a lot of weeding through different fonts, trying things out. I will, write them out in an InDesign document and really compare. And the differences again are in the subtleties. So on the left, you'll see in my title font, that is a font that I used in one of the logos that I created that I have up in this group. And I love that font. It's so gorgeous. Like it's just very classy, but it also has like this kind of distinct modern feel. Like if you look at just the little edges of the C's or the E's, there's some really cool accents in those fonts. And sometimes it might be hard to see, especially if you're watching on a phone. But there's just some creative things about this font that I love. The downside of this font, though, is that it really only has one version. So it doesn't have a bold or an italic option. And that is something to consider because it is nice to have the variety available when you are creating assets, like especially social media graphics, where maybe you want to call out something with bold or you want to italicize one word or whatever. So something to think about, right? If I choose that font, I am going to be limited to, just the version that you see here. On the right, this one is not as like just as classy or as modern. However, it does have all that variety there. And so there's a lot available to this font. It'd be very diverse as far as like, or versatile in terms of giving me a lot of options. So I do like that. It's something to consider. And then as far as paragraph fonts, the main concern that I always look with in paragraph fonts, again, the variety there is important, even maybe more so than title fonts. You want to have bold, you want to have italic. If you've got some other semi-bold or thin or, those kinds of things, that's even better because then you have some options there. And I also often will use Google Fonts for branding clients who want their fonts to load really fast on websites, which we kind of want our websites to load faster. And Google Fonts are pre-installed in browsers. So that's a little tech thing that you want to kind of keep in mind. For me, paragraph fonts aren't as important as far as like the distinctive nature of them. They need to be readable. They need to be versatile. They need to have the overall brand style and they need to pair well with your title font. So if you end up using a Google font for your paragraph font, that's not as big of a deal. You will find like a lot of other people use the same fonts because they are readily available, they're free. And if you use free fonts, they tend to just be widely used. So, again, that's something to consider. If you want something more distinctive, you can look for some paid fonts and find something, that way. But it's not as crucial as far as those things go as it is for your title fonts. For your title fonts and your accent fonts, you do want something distinctive. And so I would, for those two in particular, steer away from free fonts. If you use a font in Canva, you will find that you will start seeing it everywhere. And that loses that distinctiveness in nature in your brand of being different, of kind of separating you out when everybody else is using the same font. And I've talked about this a lot before. And in fact, I have an entire training on typography. If you are curious about that, if that's something that you've been struggling with in your business, put fonts in the comment and I can tag you in that training where I go in a little bit more in depth on some of these things. So here's some of the options. Again, I kind of have in my mind which I want to go, but I'm not quite giving everything away yet because of what I will talk at the end of this live. Okay, so next up are patterns and textures. And I love this for branding because this really adds like almost a feel, like another sense, like another dimension to your branding. It really helps you kind of stand out and be unique. It's just like this touch that kind of gives that uniqueness. And so I do these for my clients. I make patterns, custom patterns for my clients. They are also available on like Creative Market. You can look around and purchase ones. Sometimes on very rare cases, I will do that with clients who I'm looking for a very, very particular style that is very illustrated. And I know that maybe there's something out there that I want in particular. And so sometimes I will use those, but most of the time I actually do these myself. And then for my own brand, I decided to go ahead and like support another designer. So, and I had these in mind because, so for this one, for instance, this was one I really liked because if you look back at my mood board, you'll see in the tile behind the one picture up the top left that there is that sort of similar pattern in there. There's a little bit of difference, but there it is. So I use that as inspiration. And again, like I said, a lot of times I use my mood board for inspiration for some of these things. And then I can change the colors of this pattern. I often use patterns kind of faded out in the background because sometimes they can be a little bit too bold. But if use transparency and put colors over the top of them, I put an example here on the right, like just a quick, simple graphic just to show you how that could look. So that's, one option for that. And what's great about them is I can use these in all kinds of colors. I can use these with all kinds of color overlays. There's just a lot you can do with them, and they look really powerful as an addition to a website. One thing I always say is there's a lot of like kind of standard things that go into websites, so that a lot of websites look sort of similar, but what makes your website look distinct is your brand, and patterns are one way to do that. So this is one, and then here's another here that I really liked. Again, kind of this sketched floral pattern in the background, because I didn't want to get too flowery and I didn't want to get too over the top feminine, but I did like, again, if you look back at my mood board, there's some flowers in it and there's some neat natural elements into it. And again, if you put it in the background, it kind of gives just a hint of that feel of the overall mood board. And so there's a graphic example, like if I were making an Instagram post or some sort of cover photo to something, maybe that's what it could look like. So those are a couple patterns that I found. And then for textures, these are generally just photographs that I find on stock photography sites that I use. And they're real life pictures, right? That give it kind of a feel, or, add some texture to your brand. And so this is one, there was a flower that looked very similar to this in my mood board. And so I found one here that I could use, because a lot of the photos that you're pulling out of Pinterest are copyrighted. So you need to be aware of that. You can't just take those photos. You need to find your own or buy your own. So again, what I would do is put a color overlay on it and put the flower in the background. So you can see an example here. And then I kind of like this idea. We'll see if I end up using this or not, but kind of just that waviness. Again, this is another texture example. It gives some depth. I thought I would throw out a few extras that I don't think I'm going to use, but these are some that I looked at, right? I just took some pictures of them, and then, you can either buy them or add them to your brand later. But I thought this was a cool texture. When I put it together, it didn't quite work. So these are ones that I'm not going to go with, but it might give you some ideas as you're looking, some things to look for as far as patterns. You can look for sand, linens, yarn, like concrete or wood. Those kinds of things can sort of add that feel. And then the other thing that you can look at is iconography, which is, using different elements or icons and adding them in. So things like social media graphics, or in my case, a couple of the logos have this little green leaf that I could maybe repurpose somewhere. Where I saw this done really well is I follow this Pilates instructor. The business name is called Lindy Well. She's got a Pilates subscription that you can subscribe to. And when you finish one of her Pilates trainings or workouts, at the very end, it does this little like her logo is like a little bit of it's like almost like a half orange. It's like a half circle kind of thing, and it looks like, the slice of an orange kind of. Well, after you finish the exercises, there's a bunch of little confetti in the shape of her brand that comes out and goes over the top of the video, and it's kind of a cool touch, right? That's very much on brand. The other thing you can look at is photography. So these are my previous brand photos. I'm actually in the process of booking my new brand photo shoot that I will go and do in kind of in line with the style of my mood board, maybe with more of the colors that I do. So I always love to do these for branding clients. Not personally, but I always would recommend them, that they do them, especially if they're going to do their website next, because it is nice to have like high quality photos of you that look on brand, where you're wearing your brand colors. That way they match when you put them in your website. When you use different elements of your branding, you'll have those available and you can reuse them again and again in social media and all of that. So again, these are some of my older photos. I will be able to use some of them moving forward, but like for instance, that me in the pink dress isn't going to work anymore. So you're going to see some of those things change in this group as well. Also, coming up, I will be redoing my website, which I'm very excited about. This is something I've been wanting to do for ages. And it'll be something I'll be working on, and we'll be sharing some of the process with you coming up. But definitely looking forward to that. And then some of the other collateral that you can consider as you're kind of rounding out your brand is business cards, if that's applicable to you, if you need those, or stationery. Some brands use stationery all the time, others don't at all. So, pick the things that work for you. They could be things like Instagram templates, presentation templates like I'm using now. Like maybe you create it, you do a lot of teaching, or you do a lot of like workshops or webinars, those kinds of things. Then it'd be great to have a presentation template that is on brand and uses your colors and your brand assets. The other thing that a lot of people don't think about, but which is an amazing place to apply your brand, is in your client process and experience. So what are the onboarding materials they get? Do those have your brand reflected? How do you guys kind of go back and forth in communication? Is there a portal? And then the process as well, like the process that you guide them through, what is that like? What is that experience like? Does that feel on brand, or does it feel clunky and disorganized? So you want to be kind of thinking about those things as well. And then any other touch points, you get creative. It can be something as little as like your Zoom background. Like someone had actually mentioned to me once that my Zoom background was like the thing that just drew them in and made me actually finally book a website with me, which I thought was so interesting and kind of surprising. But it was kind of those little details like that, those little touches that, she said, well, I just loved it. It just made me feel like a certain feeling and I knew that I could trust my website with you. So you never know the thing that's going to do it, right? So these are all great things to think about. So that's kind of it. That's it. That's my brand that I've been working on. Again, I'll be polishing up those things and launching it officially next week. So keep an eye out for that. I'm going to be having a giveaway on Instagram. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, I'm at Allie Beck Design. Come on over and you can enter the chance to win. I have some prizes that I'm putting together. We'll be doing a big countdown. I'll be launching and displaying like the final choices and all of these things, showing you which logo I picked, which were the final patterns I picked, and which of the final fonts, all of that stuff packaged up together so you can see what it looks like cohesively. And then moving on from there. And, I know that is something to consider too when you do a rebrand. It's, you're going to have to roll it out, right? Like, especially those of you who've been in business for a little while and you've got a lot of materials, you've got a lot of things, maybe you have social media graphics and all of that stuff. It takes some time to roll it over. And ideally, it's not something that you're straddling two brands for too long. You kind of want to have a process where you're going through and updating things, you're shifting out your business cards, you're redesigning your website, all of that stuff. So something to consider if you're rebranding, and if you're finding yourself in that place where I am, where maybe you have been in business for a little while, you've got some traction, you've worked with clients, you've got more clear about who you want to work with, and you're ready to kind of elevate your business to that next level. You're like, okay, this is it. I'm committed and I'm going places with my business, and I need a brand that reflects the excellence that I provide my clients. So you might be in that place where you're ready to elevate that brand, that website. Then let's talk about it. We can sit down, have kind of a conversation about your vision, where you want to go, and see if I'm a good fit, right? It has to be both ways. It has to be a good fit for us to work together. I love supporting women in that way. And I wanted to, talk to you about what it could look like for you to actually make that investment in yourself and see those manifold returns. Like I've seen, again, those people that step out and take that risk, there's this payoff in the long term that seems unbelievable, but it always is something that is so rich and so rewarding for them. They feel as they step into that confidence, like even, not only is there like the financial return of building recognition with your brand, but it's also more than that, right? It's about the confidence that it gives you to step out and speak with authority and to kind of present yourself as authority in your space too. So if that's something that you're interested in, put call in the comments and I'd love to talk with you. And in the meantime, keep voting on the logo, and I am going to be making further announcements about all the fun things that are coming up next week. So I hope you'll join me for that. And if you enjoyed this series, let me know. I'd love to hear your feedback on it. Was it helpful? Did it give you ideas and inspiration for your own business? All of those things. So with that, I hope you all have a wonderful week.